Anyone? If you can recall what we did in our last class. No clue. Any basic idea about any of the testing techniques and all?
So I think your mute switch is on.
Okay, fine. So that means only Jayant is active. I was continuously speaking since last 2 3 minutes, and no one pointed this out. So, anyways. So what I said was that we looked into your top-down integration. We looked into your bottom-up integration. We talked about your bidirectional integration, and then we looked into your system and integration, where we said that okay, there's something which is your Big Bang integration as well. Then we saw the basic top-down integration approach, and then we looked into your bottom-up integration approach, and then afterwards we looked into your bidirectional approach, which was comparatively smaller than the previous ones. That means smaller in the sense that means the number of steps were comparatively low. And then we looked into your system or Big Bang integration, where we integrated all the components, and then we went for this Big Bang integration testing. And then we saw some benefits of it, and we also talked about something called as steps and drivers, and then we looked into when to use this particular thing. And today we are going to talk about your client server integration, which is like your two-tier system, right? I have like clients on one end, and then I have like various servers on the other hand. So it's like this is something which is like two-tier system. So what we have is like we have these many clients, and then we have a server, or it can be we can have multiple servers in this particular case. And for this, what we need to do is we can go ahead with testing each client with stubs for the server. We can test the server with stubs for each client type. We can test the pair of client type with the actual server. That means server may have the stubs for the other clients. And at the end, like the last one is will be like remove all these stubs and test the servers with the client. So here what we see is that we have the role of stubs, prominent role of stubs in this particular case, and then we go ahead with this two-tier system kind of thing. This time when we have like three-tier system. If we say that, that means there will be like servers on this end, then we have something called as your middle layer, or maybe you can call it as middle tier or middle layer, and then we have like clients on this particular end. So this becomes your three-tier system, where what we do is here we'll see the role of stubs as well. So what we can do is we can test each client with stubs for the servers, and for definitely I have like middle tier available with me. And the other thing is like test the servers with the stubs for each client type and the middle tier. That means, see, almost similar to the previous one, but here we are introducing the stubs. Then we have like test each client with a middle tier and your server proxy if required. And that means I guess the concept of proxy server is clear with everyone. Okay, so whether this proxy server concept is clear to everyone, when to use proxy servers, why actually we need to go ahead with proxy servers? Anyone? No. Okay. So what we do is, let me see some space. No. Uh, in case of proxy servers, what happens is, so basically concept of proxy is coming from your design pattern, right? Those who have studied SEQE, yeah, of course, might be aware about this design pattern. So what we have is, we have a client on one end, and then we have the actual server on the right, and then we have your proxy on the this end, right? So it's like what happens is that client has no clue about these servers. So client only is aware about the proxy server, right? Because in that sense, this is like, this proxy concept is adding an extra feature of a security measure, right? Because client has no clue about the actual server. That means where this particular server is, what's the IP and other stuff. Client is only dealing with the proxy servers, right? Proxy servers are collecting the requests from the clients, and then getting the these things, that means sending the request and receiving the acknowledgement, which is passed on further to the client. So proxy is like somewhere in the intermediary, just like in your university system also. Many times, you see this particular concept, that we have the availability of proxy servers with us, and based on that we take a call. So that's how we go ahead with the testing the each client with stubs for the servers and the middle tier. We take a call on testing each client with middle tier and the server proxy, and then we test the server with the middle tier and the client proxy. Then we go ahead with like testing the clients with the middle tier and your actual server at the end. Now, this is scenario testing. So, from the name itself, you might have got some idea that here, set of all the realistic user activities that are used for evaluating the product will be used. Then methods to evolve the scenarios will be like, I have one is your system scenarios, another one is your use case scenario. So in this one, I took an example of a check system. So this is your system scenario testing. We are creating the scenarios. That means I have a storyline where I need to develop a storyline that combines various activities of the product. So it can be, let's say, if suppose I have to get a check cleared, so all the activities which are involved in clearing that particular check will be involved. Once we have developed the storyline, I have the life cycle or the state transitions, where I consider an object, derive the different transitions or the modifications that happen to the object, and derive the scenarios in order to cover all these particular lefts and rights of the system. Afterwards, we go for the deployment or the implementation details from the customers. And then we have like various business verticals, where visualizing how a product or the software will be applied to different business verticals, and create a set of activities as scenarios. For example, your insurance or the life sciences. Then I have like battleground scenarios, like create some scenarios to justify the product works and some scenarios to try and break the system to justify that the product does not work. So it's like, we look into the real life scenarios when it works and when it fails. So in case of use case scenario, what we have is we have like actor who goes to the banker with the check, right? Then the banker queries to the system in order to know that whether the account on which this particular check has been drawn has the balance or not. So the system responds back with the actual account details, and a banker normally returns back the cash. In real life, you'll also find a teller, right, or cashier. So that is something which is a bit different, but just in case of your understanding, I took put this particular thing where we have this use case scenario. Now this particular thing is further then converted into the actors actions and the system's responses. So what we have is like one end, we have the user who would like to withdraw the cash and inserts the card in the ATM machine. Here we took the ATM machine example, and the system requests for the password or the pin. Then obviously the user will be filling in the password or that particular pin, and then the background checks are done. That means validating the password or the pin, giving a list containing types of account. Then I have like user selects an account type, and whether it is saving or it is current, and system will ask for the user, will ask for the amount which the user wants to withdraw, and definitely user is going to fill the amount, and I'm going to check the availability of the funds, update account the balance, and I'll prepare the receipt, and then will further the system is going to dispense the cash. User will receive this particular cash, then the machine is system is or the system is going to print this particular receipt. This particular thing is somewhat similar to a particular diagram which you might have studied in your software engineering, right? What was that particular diagram? What was that particular diagram? The same set of example you might have gone through. Any idea? Okay, recall some of the diagrams, right? We had something called as, state diagrams, state transition diagrams, and these things, simply were almost related to this particular scenarios. Right, so this was all about your integration testing. Any idea what can be the next testing? Any idea what can be the next testing type?
System.
Right. So let's go ahead with this new topic. Let me save these notes for you people. Yeah, so let's start with your types of testing. Right. So we started with the white box. Sorry, we started with black box. Then we moved to white box, and we said that all the techniques we'll be using from these particular umbrella headings. Right. So then we went for integration testing. Obviously, in between we also had. We can also have unit testing. Whether you want to adhere, you want to adhere. That almost uh, is the same concept. Now, system testing, right? We went for white box, we went for black box, or even we can go ahead with black box and white box, and then further we went for checking the interfaces. And now we have something which is called as system testing, right? So to start with, what we have is we have a system, right? So this is something which is a complete set of your integrated components that altogether derives the functionality and features as a complete product. So in this, what we have is we have several components, and we integrate these components in order to get the entire system. All right, small components integrated, and the resultant is something which is this entire system as a whole. And this time, what we are going to do is we are going to test our product, and that would be, you know, and that would be like I went for okay. I have a question. I've integrated it. I went for this testing. What was the testing technique done prior to this particular step? No, my question was Ujjwal that prior to this, what kind of testing we went for? Okay, Aditi said system. Sorry, I saw this. Uh, so what we have, no, some confusion. So what I'm trying to say is that for each individual components, I went for something called as unit testing. Yes or no? I went for the unit testing. And obviously we'll have some interfaces. So if suppose there are some interfaces, I'll go ahead with that same. So what we have is we have like something called a system testing. So here what we are trying to do is before this we had several components. We went for unit testing. We went for interface testing if required, and then we have integrated these components, and we went for the system testing, right? So before that we have some myths associated. So what we have is we have like individually tested components will work together when they are assembled and put together. That means the myth is that if I've tested the products like all the individual components of the product are tested, in that case, after integration of those individual components also, my entire product is going to work fine. So this is something which is myth, because many times it happens, right? Even in case of your small projects, in case of your any news or in any subjects, you get some projects. What you do is, let's say there is a group of four people in a particular project, and all those four people are working separately, and they came up with four components, and now you are trying to integrate it, and it will work fine. That's not possible. There will be some or the other issues, right? So there's something which is myth that if all the individual components are working fine, then post in integrating those components, the entire product will be fine. So for system testing, what we have is system testing of a software or hardware is the testing conducted on a complete integrated system to evaluate the system's compliance with its specified requirements. Right? This time I am going to look into requirements. So system testing falls within the scope of black box because I have specified this particular point. I am looking into the requirements. So definitely I have the entire system because previously in the internals were already looked carefully in case of white box testing. So system testing is definitely going to fall under the scope of black box testing. So that means all the techniques which we studied in case of black box testing can be applied in order to test the system. And once again, if suppose I'm not going to go into the internals of the system, so I don't need to have the idea about the knowledge of the inner design or the code or the logic. I'm only looking for the inputs and outputs now. Obviously, those non-functional requirements as well, your availability, portability, performance, and other stuff as well. So, what we have is, in case of system testing, your system testing is the only testing phase which tests both the functional and the non-functional aspects of your product. So this is the only testing phase where I am focusing on the functional and your non-functional aspects. Your system testing tests not only the design but also the behavior and even the believed expectations of the customers. Right? Expectation is like usability. If I'm looking for usability, so usability is something which should be high. Right? User friendliness, you can call it as. It is also intended to test up to and beyond the bounds defined in the software or the hardware requirements specification, right? So I'm going to look into the throughput aspect, right? I'll focus on the bottlenecks. In this particular thing, I'm going to look into these particular things. So, testing on fully integrated applications in order to test how components interact with one another and with the system as a whole. So this is also called end-to-end scenario testing. Very thorough testing of every input in the application to check for required outputs. And the testing of the user's experience with the application from start to finish, because user's experience means, because here I'm going to look into various aspects in the sense that the usability factor, your portability factor, your performance, your response time, right? So all your non-functional attributes in some sense will be tested in this particular part. And I'll consider uh, a system as a whole, right? I'll consider a system as a whole. Now let's compare your integration versus your system testing. So in case of integration testing, what we have is, I have a question, I've added a particular question after this particular discussion. Right. So in case of integration testing, this will be something which is the orderly progression of testing in which software components or your hardware components or both are combined and tested until the entire system has been integrated. Right. So an orderly progression of testing in which software components or the hardware components or both are combined and tested until the entire system has been integrated. Right. One by one, we kept on adding, we looked into the interfaces. In this particular thing, the process of testing an integrated hardware and software system to verify that the system meets its specified requirements. Right. Once again, I'm going to look into those ISRS documents now. So I went for components. I went for system as a whole. Components here means majorly I'm looking for interfaces. There's something which is low level activity as compared to this particular thing. This is something which is the highest level activity in some sense. Here I'm focusing on testing the interfaces. Here I'm focusing on looking for the product's functionality. In this particular integration, I may not go for non-functional testing, right? But here my main focus will be on non-functional testing only, right? So these are some of the differences. These are some of the minor and major differences between your integration and your system testing. Now I have a question for you, right? Whether your system integration testing and your system integration, recall this is FIT, final integration testing. So can you differentiate between, can you find the differences between this system integration testing and your system testing, or which is this FIT? What's the major difference between these two things? Or they both are same? Yeah. Whether both the things are same. Both the things are same or different? Not same, right? Right. Why? Why? Ujjwal, you can use your mic because we are hardly 8 people in number. Right? 9. Why it is same or why it is different?
Maybe one is for the real life scenario and one is for just testing interfaces.
No, 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 no. System integration testing. I'm looking for the interfaces, those links, those connections, those joints. Here I'm looking for a system as a whole. I am not focusing on your interfaces at all. So in case of final integration testing, what we do is we integrate the entire system and then we test it. But our intentions are to look for the interfaces. In system testing, I know I'm looking for the entire system as a whole, right? So this is something which is differentiating these two testing activities. Now, the question arises, why system testing? Why system testing? So, provide the independent perspective in testing and bring in customers' perspective in testing, right? I can provide the independent perspective in the testing. I can bring in customers' perspective. I can provide a fresh pair of eyes to discover defects not found earlier by testing. Once again, I can test the product's behavior in a holistic or the complete and the realistic environment. I can test both the functional and non-functional. Obviously, we had a discussion on this particular aspect. Ensure all the requirements are met and ready. The product for acceptance testing now, because now the end user is going to test the product for the final acceptance testing or the user acceptance testing. User acceptance testing. Then we have like functional versus non-functional testing. So what we have is here in case of functional, we check the functionality of the software application. In this, we check the behavior or the quality factors in case of non-functional attributes of the software application. Your functional testing results depend on the product only. Your non-functional testing not only depends on the product but also on the environment as well, because my environmental factors may slow down my performance, right? So let's see in case of functional and the non-functional testing. So what it involves is like your functional testing will involve the product features and the functionality. Here I'm only looking for the quality factors. In case of testing, I'm looking for the product behavior. Here I'm looking for behavior and experience. Uh, for the result conclusion, simple steps written to check expected results. And here I have like huge data collected and analyzed. Here results varies due to product implementation. Here I have like the product implementation. resources and configurations as well. In this case, my focus will be on the defect detection, and my focus will be on the qualification of a product. Qualification means whether I'm meeting all those compliances or the points which are were jotted down by the end user in the SRS documents. Here I need to have the idea about the product and the domain. Here I need to have the idea about so many things. That was is like product, domain, design, architecture, statistical skills, and so on and so forth. And this failure is obviously due to code. Here it will be due to architecture, design, and code. All testing phase is like unit, component, integration, and system. Here I have only system as here all a particular unit, if it is comparatively large, I can treat this particular unit as a system as well. So that kind of testing also we can go ahead. Then we have okay, I saw just now I saw Ujjwal's answer. For example, in Therac 25 case, developers did not test for system integration. They didn't see the link. Okay, yeah, correct. Ujjwal, very correct. Yeah. So configuration, like one-time setup for a set of test cases where I have like configuration changes for each test case. So these are some differences between your functional and the non-functional testing. Now, when we talk about non-functional testing techniques, what all options I have? Like I have performance testing, I have load, scalability, reliability, stress, interoperability, localization, and then I also, I have something which is like availability. I have something which is your portability. I have something which is correctness. I have something called as modifiability. I have so all the possible exabilities I can include in this particular non-functional testing. So start with what we have is we have performance, right? So in case of performance, I have like to evaluate the time taken or the response time or the throughput of the system. To perform its required functions in comparison with different versions of same product or a different competitive product. Right. Next one is your load testing. So load testing is performed to determine a system's behavior under both normal and anticipated peak load conditions. Right. So one is like load can be tested during the normal time and during the peak load as well, right? IRCTC, So IRCTC is one of the example. Like what you can test it is that testing can be done during the regular hours, and then another will be the peak load, which is like during the call hours. The testing can be done because that would be the anticipated peak load condition, and sometimes like it goes beyond anticipation as well. So load testing helps you to identify the maximum operating capacity of an application as well as any bottlenecks and determine which element is causing degradation. Next is next is your load testing, right? How much load I can take. So I took this particular example. I am not sure whether this particular website works or not. Normally, in my regular classes, I used to take a demo as well. So maybe in the next class, I'll take a demo of another product. Right now, if I can check that, okay, this cloud assault is not working, so you will not talk about this particular thing. See, load testing is basically, let's say at a particular moment of time, number of simultaneous users my system can handle. Right, I'll show you some examples on that particular part as well. And here what happens is that, let's say, normally my response time is, let's say, 500 milliseconds. So during the peak hours, my response time is, let's say, 450 milliseconds. Then also I consider that okay, a product is fine, right? So that's how we go ahead with this. As I said, this particular thing does not exist now. The website itself does not exist. You don't have to consider this particular example. I'll give you a separate demo on a particular tool someday. Next is the scalability testing, right? So the testing of the software application for measuring its capability to scale up or scale out in terms of any of its non-functional capability, whether it is user load support or the number of transactions, the data volumes, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the options. Next is your reliability testing. So to evaluate the ability of the system or an independent component of the system to perform its required functions repeatedly for a specified period of time, we go ahead with your reliability testing. Right. Next is your stress testing. So what we do is that we evaluate a system beyond the limits of the specified requirements or the system resources, such as like disk space, right? Your disk size and your memory, your process utilization, in order to ensure that the system does not break down unexpectedly. That is something which is called as your stress testing. So let's say my system is made for, let's say, 1,000 simultaneous users, right? So in that case, I'm going to test it beyond that, till how many simultaneous users my system can work easily, right? So that particular thing will take care of. I'll try to give some extra load on the system so that I can test the extent to which my system can go beyond the limits in case of your disk space, memory, or the process utilization. Yeah. Then we have this interoperability testing, right? Where what we have is like interoperability test. In the interoperability, the idea is to uh, go ahead with this particular thing to ensure that two or more products can exchange the information, use the information, and work closely, right? So this is something which is your interoperability testing. Next is your localization testing. So localization testing comes under your internationalization testing. We'll separately talk about this I-18N, right, of a software product. So this testing is done to verify that the product works in different languages or not. So usability, once again, I'm looking for usability in terms of whether my application is available in various languages or not. So localization, when we talk about localization, so this particular testing is done for a product which is adapted for usage in your foreign market. So products that are localized to international markets often face domestic competition, which makes it critical for the localized products to harmonize easily into the native language and the cultural landscape. So my localization testing verifies how well the build has been translated into the target language. If the localized product contains high quality native language translation and retain the functionality of the product, right? So I'm able to cater the needs of those people uh, where I have to target, and the language is added in a way that I'm able to give my product as it is without compromising on the overall functionality of my product. So if the localized product reflects various cultural conventions of the target country, that would be an added advantage, right? So I expect I'll have some more number of users. So localization testing will include checking of the software's graphical user interface translations, verify adaptation of interfaces elements, the user guide and the help and the other auxiliary documents are translated well or not, correct justification and interface element accommodation, description of rules for text writing and all. So all these things will be added here. So the localization service ranges into your Translation, one of the service, I need to have a professional translator. Editing and proofreading, I need to have the experienced tech writers, editors, and proofreaders. Content creation, I need to have the subject matter experts for multilingual operation applications like web publication, publishing, marketing tools, etc. The corporate communication, I need to have the experts in internal and external communication tools. Then cultural consulting, like project managers with known knowledge, experience, and expertise to help with strategic planning. I have like globalization solutions where I'll share with you about the communication challenges. Then software and web localization where available languages and technical resources to customers specific localization needs. So then we have like professional communicators where who will be guiding and communicating with the customers throughout the translation process. Then we have the project managers who will be helping the customers with effective delivery of a target message and manage the entire localization process. Then we have like full scope resources for localization, where the experts in translation, multilingual publishing, website localization, and multimedia services will be the major responsibilities. Then we have like professional language experts, we have subject matter experts, we have up to date technical resources for various roles and responsibilities. Then we have like functional testing techniques under the system test. We have like the architecture verification. We have like business vertical testing. We have deployment testing. We have beta testing. Then we have class certification standards and testing for the compliances. Right. Then we will talk about these things one by one in our next class. Then, if you have any doubts today, then we can have a discussion further. We can have a discussion on the current topics if you have some doubts.